Everybody, so this is another video analysis coming to you from the Wellness Center of Chester County. This is Dr. Zappy speaking, and I want to bring to you a video of a squat pattern. I have people all the time come in for various conditions, and I always have them do a squat pattern because I can get a lot of information from the squat pattern, and I typically have a bunch of different questions. You know, why are you watching me squat? I don't work out, I don't go to the gym, I don't squat. So just about every joint is pretty much involved in the squat pattern, except for, I don't know, maybe some outliers here and there. But just about all the major joints in the body are involved in the squat pattern, and the dynamics of how they move are very important. People think that just because they're not in the gym doing squats, they don't squat, and I challenge people just to ask them, when's the last time you sat down? And they'll say, on the exam table right before we came to do these squats, and I said, all right, when's the last time you sat down before that? When I was in the car. Well, when's the last time you sat down before that? When I was at my desk at work. Okay, when's the last time you sat before that? And I keep going with them until I hit a point where I'm just like, every time you sit down and get up, you're doing a squat. That's a squat pattern. Whether you have a bar on your back with a ton of weight or not, you're doing a squat pattern. And if you're doing it wrong, you're putting yourself at risk for injury. So we're going to watch a typical squat pattern here. I'm going to show you guys what exactly I'm looking for. This isn't the greatest squat pattern, so it's a pretty good example of what to watch out for as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at it full speed here first. And then we'll go back and we'll frame by frame it, and I'll point some stuff out to you guys. So we're going to go right to the front here again, and I want to draw basically what I'm looking for before we start and make some adjustments here. So the joints that are going to be involved, right? What joints are going to be involved? So let's just go ahead and draw out here what I'm looking for. So we have the foot in this angle. We have this bone right here, which is called the tibia. Then we have this next bone right here, which is called the femur. And then we have the hips and the spine come all the way up. And then you have your humerus goes up like that. Okay, so these are the bones that are involved. And at every point where those bones meet, you have a joint. So here's a joint right here, that's your ankle joint. Here's a joint right here, that's your knee joint, hip joint, shoulder joint. And then you have all different kinds of joints in your spine. So all throughout here, there's a ton of different joints. But what I want to point out to you is that you need your muscles in order to control these joints. Okay, so the bone at the top, the humerus, can either go left or right around this joint right here. The trunk can move this way or this way around this joint. The knee can bend up around this joint. The ankle can move that way or this way around this joint. So all these different things move differently, and the way that you utilize them is very important for the mechanics of how the joint is and the integrity of the tissues as you're using those joints. Different loads, different pressures, different amount of weights can get translated into those joints based on how you use those joints and how you get down into the pattern. So the typical pattern that we like to see, I'm going to show you where I want to end up. So the foot is on the ground. That's not really going to move too much. So we want the foot to pretty much stay where it is. The tibia, we don't want it to go too far past the toes because that puts you in a compromised position. So we're going to want to end up somewhere around here. And in order to do that, you can clearly kind of see the angle that we're going to need at the ankle joint in order to get there. So you're going to need about this much of an angle in what's called ankle dorsiflexion in order to get your tibia into that position. The next thing that we're going to need is I want to get at least the thigh bone, the femur. I want that to get at least parallel to the ground. So that should be something like that. Okay. If it gets lower, that's great, but right around here is where I want it to get to at least. So in order for that to happen, the knee joint needs to be able to flex to that degree, and the hip joint needs to be able to flex, which we're going to get to in a second. So in order for the spine to stay stable, in order for the spine to be in a nice, good position, we're going to want it to be parallel with where the tibia is. So I'll draw two lines for you here. This one here is going to be where the spine is. like that. And that is going to be parallel to the extension of this line. So they should be parallel lines, and that's a pretty functional position to be in. In order to get into that position, you need so much degree of hip flexion. Okay, so in order to get down to that position, so you need knee flexion and hip flexion in order to get there, as well as ankle dorsiflexion so far. The final joint that we're going to take a look at is where the shoulders should be placed. So the shoulder, let me just put that back real quick. So the shoulders, where we want them, was we want them to come straight up like this. Oh, let me change that color again. So we want the shoulders to be able to come straight up, if not a little further back. And basically what this does is if you're doing some type of really strong, powerful lift and you're holding a bar over your head, the more that we can get the weight over your center of gravity, the better. The further you take this weight forward, the more it's going to pull you forward, and the more it's going to create different compensation patterns in your squat. So we don't really want you to lean forward. This is a weight shift and a weight control issue. Even if your arms are down, the top part of your body typically has a little bit more weight to it. So being able to control this left or right motion will come from just stressing it a little bit and putting the arms overhead. So what I'm really looking for is a weight shift issue. So I want the arms to stay pretty much where they are, and you should just sit right down into where you're at. In order for that to happen, you need to have so many degrees of glenohumeral joint, which is the shoulder joint, into flexion. So that's actually a really big angle here. This is an obtuse angle. We need a lot of flexion in the glenohumeral joint in order to get into that position. And we also need a fair amount of what's called thoracic spine extension. So thoracic spine is right in this area here. It's like the longest region of your spine. And in order for your glenohumeral joint to have the amount of flexion in it, you have to have a good amount of extension through here. So all different kind of things that we're going to be talking about when you're doing squat patterns in the office or anything, or if you're going to another movement specialist, what they should be talking about. But these are the different things that we're going to be looking at, and if anything is really off, what will happen is it will throw everything else off. So if you have a lack of, let's say, ankle dorsiflexion, if you can't get into the angle that we'd like to see here, what will happen is the knee will get compromised, the hip can get compromised, the low back can get compromised. All the joints kind of in that area and up this chain can kind of get compromised at different levels. So things that we want to be aware of, every time you sit down, you should sit down in this type of pattern. If you're not sitting down in that type of pattern, you're putting yourself at risk for injury. You're using joints in different ways than you should be using them, and you might be over time developing a pattern of pain and tissue damage. So let's go ahead and frame by frame this, and I want to point out some different things here. So over on the right, what we can see is as he's coming down, before he even starts, there's a little bit too much of what's called external rotation. So I see a lot of his toes. So right in through here, we see almost past his big toe. So I don't want to see that at all. I only want to see like these two toes over here. That's all I should really see, maybe about that much. The fact that I can see past his big toe is a little bit too much of external rotation. So basically he's brought this foot out this way. I want to see it come back in a little bit, kind of point more forward. What that will do is it'll put his knee in a lot better position. And I'm going to explain that to you in a second here of why that happens. So as he goes down, what we're going to see is a little bit more. See that? His feet are coming out even more as he goes down. What that's telling me is that he doesn't have the first thing that I was talking about on the left here, which is the ability to dorsiflex his ankle. So because he can't dorsiflex his ankle, what he's doing is he's compensating with external rotation in order to sit down into the squat pattern. What that does is it actually puts his knee into a very compromised position. It's actually called a relative position. So he's putting his knee into what's called relative valgosity. Valgosity is when the knee collapses inward, so this knee falls in or this knee falls in. So his knee actually isn't falling in. This isn't a strength issue from the hip. It's not a strength issue of the ability to control the knee. What it is his ankles are rotating so far out that his knees have relatively fallen in because of the amount of external rotation that he's put into his tibia and into his ankles. You can even see a little bit because of the lack of dorsiflexion, he's actually even rising the heels a little bit. If you look right here, they're actually coming off the ground. The heels should not come off the ground. You should be able to do this movement without the heels coming off the ground at all. So we can clearly see that there's a little bit of an issue there. So let's go ahead and take a look at the other side here. I'm just going to take this video out on the right here. Give me a second. Oh, maybe not. Anyway, so let's take a look over here on the left, and we'll see a little bit more what's going on. So what I'd like to see on the left side is I'd like to see him just drop straight down into the squat pattern and right into those positions that I had put in there before. Right off the bat, we see him kind of arching the chin up a little bit and looking up. I'd like him to tuck the chin back in a little bit and look straight ahead. That will put his spine in a little bit of a better position. What he's doing really is he's preloading the cervical spine into extension. I don't really like that. It's a bit of a compromised position. But as we keep going forward here, we're dropping straight down, and right around here, what happens is everything kind of changes a little bit. So this is the moment where you're going to see a little bit more external rotation in the foot and a lot of weight shift coming forward from the trunk. He's going to lean forward a little bit, and that's going to come from a couple different issues, which we'd have to really do some more exams in order to be able to see. But the point of it is that it's dysfunctional, and he's putting himself at risk for injury. If he's in the gym doing squat patterns, he might get hurt. Or if he's doing any type of dynamic athletic thing or dynamic movement pattern or anything like that where he's really stressing these tissues in this position, he's putting himself at, in harm's way. So as he keeps going down here, we're going to see him kind of reach forward there. The arms are coming forward, the trunk is coming forward, the head is still trying to look straight up here, and he's poking the chin out a little bit. A lot of extension in the cervical spine here, and then we keep going down, and right around here things kind of take a turn for the worse. So the hip joint here needs to be able to flex as much as possible in order to get this hip to parallel with the ground. If you can't do that, what will happen is the hamstrings will actually pull the pelvis, they'll round the pelvis out, and you'll go into what's called lumbosacral flexion. So there's a joint right in here in the low back, right in through there, right around here. It's where the lumbar spine meets the pelvis, meets the sacrum. It's called the lumbosacral joint. It's a very compromised area when you go into flexion. It puts a lot of pressure on the disc in that area. So if we were going to add weight into this movement, he'd be at a very high risk to do a disc herniation or a disc injury. So we're going to keep going through here, and I'll show you. So he's rounding the back a lot right now. If this bar was back a little further and he had weight coming through here, the amount of pressure that would be in his lumbar spine right through here is not something that I like to see. And then he rounds it even further as he sits all the way down into the squat. So in order to kind of correct this, you'd have to get into a really good program with a movement specialist who knows exactly what they're doing. We'd have to do a couple more tests on this guy to actually know exactly what's happening, whether it's coming from specifically the hips, whether it's coming from the posterior chain, just strength in the back, whether it's coming from a lack of thoracic extension, whether it's coming from the actual ankle, or whether it's coming from general just core instability in this whole area right here. In order to really develop a treatment program for him, we'd have to do a couple more tests and a couple more screens to see what's going on. But from this position right here, every time he gets into this position, he's putting himself at risk for injury. So this is a very simple test to do on anybody who's an athlete. You know, if you got a mirror and you want to take a look at yourself or film yourself doing this motion, please do it and see if you're at risk for injury. Look for the things that I said. If you can't get into that initial position that we talked about in the beginning of the video, I highly recommend going to visit any personal trainer or physical therapist or chiropractor who is very well educated in movement patterns and knows how to train these patterns back to normal. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, or you can message me at my email, joezappydc@gmail.com. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, and visit our website at wcofcc.com. Stay tuned for another episode in a couple weeks. Thanks, guys.